Hi, Matt here from Rocket Expansion. So I've got a very special surprise for you guys. And I've got a special guest with me, as you can see. So there's a bit of a hot topic right now about app development. It's been a hot topic for quite a while, but it's moved into a whole new phase of technology now. And today we are going to go about telling you building an app, when you should do it, why you should do it, and how you should do it. Cool, so to help us with this, we have Greg Gunner from Co-Foundry Development House. Co-Foundry's built apps for international airlines, for $150 million software products. He's built very advanced websites, which are technically apps, which have over 2 million users. So very, very qualified to lead us through this. So welcome, Greg.
Cool, awesome. Thank you very much, Matt. Like the opportunity.
Awesome. So the first thing I just want to go into is some definitions, just so people really understand. You know, app is a word that gets thrown around a lot, right?
Yep.
So maybe you can just tell us in a fairly easy to understand, simple way, like what really an app is.
Cool. So really at the end of the day, an app is just a short version of the word application. And the idea is with an app or an application is to encapsulate or try to put into some area of functionality an easy way to perform some task. Make it simpler than what you might have done something in the past by using an app to kind of get that job done, right? So in the past, like this should take a really good example, take like Uber, it's an app. And what is it trying to do? It's trying to make sure that you connect with someone who can provide the service of getting you somewhere. So in the old days, you pick up the phone like the call center and say, hey, listen, I would like a driver to pick me up at such and such address. And eventually someone would come and arrive, and then there would be some sort of billing cycle. You'd have to have an account with them. So there's a lot of stuff with that, right? A lot of processes and procedures, etc. So an app is now trying to take that and shorten that down to the shortest possible cycle to complete the task. And that's really, at the end of the day, that's all an app is. Trying to shorten the time involved in getting something done.
So taking out like kind of manual processes and tiresome things that could just be done on repeat, and using the power of technology to just accelerate that and do it in much more volume.
Exactly.
Okay,
yep.
Cool. Makes sense. And then what about, I mean, I've heard you get things called web apps, and like, what about something like, is Facebook as a website, for example, or like, I don't know, Airbnb as a website, for example, or something like that? Could you really call that an app, or is that really a website, or is there a difference? I know these things almost get used interchangeably sometimes.
Yeah, so technically at the end of the day, a website could be seen as an app as soon as it starts providing some functional purpose that's helping you perform an activity, then it starts falling into that realm of an app, right? So an e-commerce store technically is an app. It's an application that's just simply running your browser, you're browsing around, you're buying something, you're adding it to your cart, you're going through a checkout process or whatever. So yes, from that perspective, it's functionally providing you it's helping you solve a problem. And again, in a short period of time. So yeah, that's an app. But you take like a website that's just got content, not necessarily an app, because there's no functional purpose it's serving, right? So as soon as it's into a functional purpose that's providing you some solution, helping you solve a problem, then it starts becoming an application.
Awesome, makes sense. And then let's just go into the purpose of an app. What, in your opinion, is the main reason a business should actually want to build an app?
So really that comes down to what problems they're trying to solve that are consuming a lot of time. So if you look at a business is trying to get a task or activity done in the shortest amount of time it possibly can, because that way it can accelerate its growth or expand more or get more business, whatever it is. Any customer comes in to buy something or wanting a particular service, they always want it as fast as possible. We're growing in that attitude as a consumer to want that as quickly as possible, whatever it is. So a business should look to software to help to streamline and optimize the time spent in completing a particular cycle of action, whatever that might be.
And they could be like internal within the business or external to the customer, or between the customers, or whatever the cycle of the thing in the business anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it is the thing that you're trying to shorten, wherever that might be. Internal, external, doesn't really matter. But ultimately, that's what a business should be looking at when it's looking at, I need an application or an app, is to try to solve that problem and reduce the time.
Cool, makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Cool, so the next thing I want to go into is you get this get people really excited, and oh, it's all sexy building an app, and now this guy's like, cool, I want to build an app that makes me $1 billion in like every 1 minute, and here's my 10 grand. Now, like, how do you, obviously we know this is just, in like any business, there is some actual, strategy and everything that goes into it, but how do you know that your app will actually be really used and is actually going to be successful for the purpose that it was originally built?
Yeah, cool. We actually get this all the time. People have an app idea and they say, great, to them it's a fantastic idea, it's a brand new idea, it's going to be a market success, etc., etc. But the real reality is that when you're interested in building an app and when you're wanting to do that, you have to first understand that the app has to be usable. The moment it's in a person's hands is the first moment you have of validating whether the app is viable. So when you go into app development and looking for a solution, you really need to be looking at it from the viewpoint of what's the shortest amount or the shortest set of features that I can have that will help me to validate that this idea is worthwhile.
Build a prototype, basically.
Yeah, and there's various strategies to do that, right? So you can build a prototype that's just simply a visual prototype that people can kind of click through. It doesn't really functionally do what it's supposed to do, but it helps you to test out the idea. Then you can also go into what we call the minimum viable product, whereas maybe you've done some validation of the idea and you've produced that application in the smallest set of features that you need in order for it to satisfy the requirement of your end user. So that's called your minimum viable product. So when you're going for app development and wanting to get a solution, you really want to be thinking in bite sizes, not thinking in, hey, great, I have this great idea, it needs to have X, Y, Z and all these features. Because big companies have made some really costly, it's cost them a lot of money to go through that process. There's large companies, even the likes of Google. Many years ago, we actually had Google Wave. It was a project management tool. And it was put into market, etc., and it got cut eventually because nobody was using it. There was other competitors in the marketplace, and you would think that Google would actually make something that would be successful, but it's not necessarily true. They also have Google Plus, which was a social media product, right? That completely it took years, but eventually they cut it because it just wasn't
Nobody really adopted it, really.
Exactly, and you'd think a social media product, surely it's going to get adopted. So you really have to almost disabuse yourself of the idea that just because you have an idea doesn't make it successful. The only time it becomes successful is when you validated that idea in the user's hands or on their computer or whatever. That's the point in time it needs to be done. So that's the first aspect of the question, answer that question. The second aspect to answer on that question is don't think that an app is going to be cheap. Yes, there's certain ways, and if your app is like a ton of others, yes, you might be able to skin the cat on that one and get already pre-boxed solutions. But 9 times out of 10, often your way of how you want to do something is unique. So you also have to be prepared that you're going to have to go along a custom development line in order to produce what it is that you're trying to do. So just be prepared that, sure, an idea is going to have to get validated, you're going to have to go through development, and you're going to have to be prepared for a longer term game, not this short term, okay, great, I spent 10,000 Rand or whatever it is, and you're done. Apps have to evolve. You have to have the attitude that you're going to be continuously spending to evolve that product so it meets the user requirements more and more and more.
Makes sense.
That's basically the plan.
And I suppose just on that how much it costs thing, we're so used to going to the Google Play Store, the iStore, and just saying, oh, $5 app, $10 app, whatever. But those guys are banking on 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 people paying that money. But we don't actually realize that app actually cost $100,000 in developer fees or something, which is not even an uncommon number for apps to be development cost to be, right?
Absolutely. I mean, you just take the likes of Uber. I've had tons of that have come in. I'd like to build something like Uber, and the reality is, an Uber product probably took 2 years to actually build in the version that you're seeing it. But because we see it in front of our face, we think, oh no, it's just easy, it's right there. But there's a lot of research, there's a lot of development.
So that's a multi-million-dollar investment to build that, no doubt.
Exactly. Yeah. And the more social interaction, more social media your product is, really the longer track, because you always have to evolve. You always have to evolve it. Whereas a business application that solves an internal problem can be very exact. So you can build to a certain point and it can actually validate and be far more viable for the business in a shorter period of time. So, you know, it's always based on where the product's going to go as well. Might influence the price and whatever the case is. But the reality is it will cost you some money to put in. You're going to have to
confront a bit of a price tag.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. Cool. And you've kind of gone into this a little bit, but can you tell us a little bit about project scoping? Like, how does a non-tech minded business fully understand the scope of what it takes to build a successful technology tool?
Yeah, so this is always the thing, is like anybody arrives at the door of and the best comparison here is building a house. It's always building a house. We're all accustomed to the fact that when you build a house, you're going to have an architect's drawings. You don't exactly just go to the developer and say, please build me the house, and he starts with the walls, right? He has to have some guidelines. He has to have some instruction about where to put what. There's multiple people that have to be coordinated, from your electrician to your plumber to the guy that does the plastering to the roofing, whatever. They all have to be coordinated, so there has to be a plan. So when it comes to an application, you have to have a plan. If you don't, then you are going to be in a position of very dangerous territory, because you don't necessarily know what's going to happen. So if you want, the best way to achieve a goal is to plan it. Just because it's been done before doesn't mean that there can't be a plan. So you have to work with that. So scoping out your thing is like getting the architect's drawings for your building the house.
And the builder can go, okay, cool, I need this many bricks, I need this much glass, I need this roofing thing. Oh, the floor's going to be marble, or it's going to be tile. And obviously this heavily influences the price. Exactly. It's probably a similar thing with apps, right? Exactly.
And there's tons of different variants of an app, and tons of different variants of how something is done, etc. So that all has to be planned in, all has to be visually laid out and understood specifically, so that everyone in the team is very much informed, all the stakeholders are very much informed, and you just know what needs to be done.
Makes complete sense. And then sort of following on for this, there's obviously, like we've mentioned, a significant investment in building an app. So now, how can a business ensure that they're making the best use of this investment capital as they develop their technology platform, and basically ensure there's return on investment?
Yeah. So again, it comes to this whole MVP concept, minimum viable product, and also thinking in releases. So you want to break your idea into bite sizes. Take the most important business value, what would be the most important business objective to achieve.
Maybe we can think of some example just to lead through this.
So probably the best case example is, let's think about this. So, okay, good, let's just take the Uber example, right?
Okay.
So you choose an Uber because you want to get to somewhere, right? So that's the first problem you wanted to solve. So just connecting you with a driver, not necessarily doing budgets or costs or bidding between the drivers or whatever, but the first problem is connect you with the driver and get you somewhere. So that would be the first minimum viable product version.
So they release that and people start using that.
Yeah, exactly. And then you would, okay, good. You'll iterate over the next version, and you'll look at the feedback that you start getting back from people and start informing what should you do next. There's always a classic example, like if you were to build something that helps people get somewhere, you might have this great, fantastic idea of a new type of car, it's got these wheels and whatever the case is. And that's your idea about how to transport people. So fine, you go through all this engineering, all this building, etc., and eventually you only have a car at the end of like a year period. Now, great, it will get you somewhere, but you haven't yet validated through that process how well this is working. So you get to the end of 12 months and you find out, actually, this is a terrible idea.
Nobody's going to pay $1 million for a car.
Exactly. So the idea is that you start first with the smallest version, like a skateboard. You invent the skateboard, design it, etc., and you get it into some users' hands, and then they start testing it. It actually needs some handles. So you put like a little handlebar on it, etc., and then you test it out. So you're not really getting user satisfaction, but you're getting some feedback to validate what you're looking for. Then you move on to a bigger thing, like a bicycle, etc., and you progress this. But every single time, you're focusing on what is the goal to transport. You're not trying to go for the biggest design, the biggest features first. You're focusing on each element is around the exact purpose of why you deliver it. You're building the software to solve that exact problem. So you got to look at it from that point of view. So for a company, they have to break that idea down into what are the bite sizes and focus on the next bite size. Get that done, get it validated, get it used by the company employees or whatever the case is, or the consumer, wherever the app is going, and just continue to focus around that. Having that strategy will deliver a far more accurate, successful product, because you're always making a step, validating, make a step, validating, instead of going 10 steps and then only validating.
Makes sense. And I guess it's also going to mean that at each step you're going to be generating whatever returns you set out to in the first place, because it's actually going to be used more and more and more in the direction of the purpose that you're trying to go. So you'll get your ROI right from the first release, and then okay, maybe it's going to be less than you expected, whatever, but then by the fifth or sixth release, you're going to basically recoup your costs as you go.
Exactly. I mean, you could probably sum it up into one very simple scenario: is how well will the product get used? That's your goal, to get the product used as much as possible. And if you wait too long to test that out, you just risk all of that financial investment.
Because you could stop at like phase 1 and you go, this is terrible, and then just go, cool. Or you could completely change direction.
Exactly.
But you can't do that if you just go straight to phase 7.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like if you had $1 million or whatever, and you spent all that first, you risk all of that. But if you spent $250,000 first and tested out, you would find out a hell of a lot more value out of that, and only risk
25%,
25% of it. So it really makes logical sense to kind of break it up into that,
And then this leads perfectly onto the next question, talking about user experience. Now there's a big, UX, or, in the whole website app kind of world, is this big buzzword. Can you tell us a little bit about this? You've kind of almost got into it already a little bit, but...
So if you look at how software has evolved over the years, software back in the day, like 20, 30 years ago, was very much driven by the developer. He would choose where the buttons went, etc., and then there would be heavy training to train people on how to use it. So, and software used to come with lots of manuals. I don't know if you remember, like Microsoft Word used to be this like manual, Word for Dummies.
It used to be like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, exactly. So you just have a library at home just for your freaking how to use the software.
Yeah.
So, but we've matured in our understanding, whereas to the point now we're always trying to develop software around user needs. So your user experience should be driving your design decisions on where buttons should be, or how the layout should function, or how it should flow, should be really driven by what the users are giving you back. If software is developed more around that, it'll be far more easier to use, far more easier to train, and technically should try to achieve the goal of not having to train. Because if you build it right, if you build it correctly around user requirements and user experience, it should be then natural for the user to kind of get through it and know where he's got to go without having to really think about it.
Makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And I've also seen like there's a kind of almost like a wizard thing, that some things you like come on and the app almost teaches you how to use it. Say, start here, do this, then go here, and then it's almost like the app trains you how to use it. So it's almost part of the app.
Exactly. So again, applications are always down to, will the user use it? If you can master that user experience, you can actually make a successful application. So it's all around user experience, it's all around those features, bite sizes, etc.
So pretty much the most important thing.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. If the users aren't using it, it's
a waste.
It's a waste.
Yeah, it makes complete
sense.
sense.
Your goal has got to be that. How do you make sure that that becomes something that they will use?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. And then just sort of wrapping it up, like this is just the open-ended, anything else kind of question. Like your best advice, like with all your experience as a leading software developer, if you had like one golden nugget to share about how a successful business should approach, or how a business should approach app development successfully, what would that be?
The golden nugget. It's hard to put it down to one particular rule.
Pick one that you think is a good one.
But I think the most important thing is probably around user experience and validating your idea. If you orientate yourself around that, you will plan correctly. You'll want to release quickly. You'll want to build your project into phases. You won't have this big, massive castle idea and want to build all that first before you decide to use it.
So focus on them, not you, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's always the difficulty. People have an idea and they almost, under the surface, they don't want to validate it because they don't want to find out that it's a bad idea. So they want to build it, put it out there and be happy about it. But you really got to understand that at the end of the day, it's more about the user. So even though you have a great idea, that idea is nothing. It's not great until the user is using it and they're validating that it's a great idea.
Makes complete sense. Very much the same in marketing. You focus completely on your customer, tailoring everything to your customer, customer service, customer experience. You get more referrals. It's like, if you want something to grow, make sure you're doing it for the right person.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much. That's been super helpful.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Awesome.
Have you again sometime again.
Yeah, looking forward to it.